Recording in progress.
Good afternoon. My name is Councillor Gwenel Ellis and I'm the Chair of the Education and Skills Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting today, which is a multi-location meeting. All the meetings which are open to the public will be recorded and live streamed, and they'll be available to watch after the meeting has ended. If the live stream fails, the meeting will continue and the recording will be available on the Council's website after the meeting has ended. I'd like to remind members that a simultaneous translation service is available and those attending online need to choose their language. Those who wish to speak in the chamber, please raise your hand. Those attending online, use the hand raising function. The speakers in the chamber and those attending online will be invited to speak alternately. Those attending online, remember that those in the chamber can't use the chat function. Members of the committee need to keep their cameras on during the discussions and when voting to maintain the accuracy of the decision-making process. If you have to leave the meeting temporarily, place a message in the chat function so that the Democratic Services Officer knows, and then let us know when you return. I expect everyone present and who are taking part in this meeting to behave appropriately and respect each other. This is relevant to members, officers, and anyone in the public gallery. That's it. Thank you. We'll move on to the agenda. Item number 1, apologies for absences.
Apologies have been received from councillors Hannah Fleet and Jacob Williams, and also Colette Owen, who's a co-opted member.
Sally.
Thank you, Sally. Item number 2, declarations of interest. I'd like to remind members that they must declare the nature of their declared personal interest. Does anybody want to declare an interest?
No, then
Okay. Item number 3, urgent matters. No urgent matters, or I'm not aware of any. Item number 4, minutes to approve and sign as a correct record minutes of the previous meeting. The meeting that was held on the 1st of April, pages 3 to 7 in your packs. Can I have a proposer and a seconder to approve the minutes, please?
Cynghorydd Aron yn cynnig.
Councillor Aron proposing. And Councillor Carol Beard seconding. And can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. Item number 5, minutes of the Conwy Standing Advisory Council on Religious Education. The meeting that was held on the 17th of March 2025, pages 8 to 14. Can I have a proposer and a seconder to note the minutes, please? Proposer, Councillor Stephen, and Councillor Anthony Bertola seconding. And can we vote by show of hands, please? Thank you. Item number 6, question to Cabinet members. None. Item number 7, to review the Education and Skills Forward Work Programme, pages 15 to 48 in your packs, to be presented by Dawn Hughes, Scrutiny and Committee Services Officer. I'd just like to remind members that they should only raise topics that relate to the remit of the committee. If committee members have any items that they wish to see on the Forward Work Programme, can I ask that they email the Scrutiny and Committee Services Officer with the relevant scrutiny topic form, which can then be considered against the approved prioritisation criteria in the appropriate manner. Thank you, Dawn.
So
pnawn da pawb. So the draft forward plan for 25-26 municipal year is enclosed within your agenda packs at pages 15 to 20. Can I advise a couple of amendments since we've had our last meeting? So the annual report on the skills and employability strategy is scheduled for September, and a report on school standards, on progress, impact on change, challenge and support across Conway School. That is scheduled for your next meeting on the 3rd of June. That's my update, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr, Dawn.
Thank you, Dawn.
Gai gynigydd a
Can I have a proposer and a seconder to agree on the work programmes, please?
Cynghorydd Aron.
Councillor Aaron proposing and Councillor Joe Nuttall seconding. And can we have a show of hands in the chamber and on Zoom, please? Thank you. Okay, item 8A, an updated paper on belonging, engaging and participation, pages 49 to 374. The Cabinet Member for Education, Councillor Julie Fallon, will introduce the report, and Scott Ford-Worley, the Inclusion Manager, will go through the report. Thank you, Councillor Julie.
So yeah, as the chair has said, Scott's going to go through the report and explain to you. So this is a paper on belonging, engaging and participation, and I'm sure we're all aware that, well, we're all conscious post-COVID, and to a certain extent, obviously before COVID, attendance was incredibly important. Post-COVID, we've seen that the need to address that increase, but it's much wider than just attendance. It's around support for families. It's around what we're doing to support families in the community as well as in schools, and what the team are doing to support schools in order to address what is a growing need for support, whether that's behaviour or social, emotional issues. And this is just about what we're doing to support schools, what schools are doing to support families and the youth service to really help a child to feel like they belong, like they're important. You know, sometimes I think kids don't really recognise that. So, you know, this is a really good paper. The team are working incredibly hard. The approach is fantastic. I've seen it, heard it firsthand from schools as to what we can do to help to address that. It's not a case of just disciplining families or children in terms of attendance. It's trying to understand why is it an issue and trying to address that. And that's what you'll see from this paper, the great deal of work that goes in as part of that. And as I said before, it's a multi-agency approach as well. So I'll hand over to Scott to go through the report. And I want to say a massive thank you to Scott. How long have you been in post now? A couple of years, is it? Year and a half, 18 months, probably feels like 5, but Scott's done a fantastic job. The feedback that I get from schools is amazing. And I apologise. I know it's not nice hearing that necessarily when you're sitting there, but it is. It's really powerful to have that positive connection with our schools. So massive credit to Scott and all the team, and to Lodi, obviously, and to the youth service as well. And what Rachel does there is really powerful. But yeah, I'll let them go through and then I might come back in again after, Chair. Diolch.
Diolch. Pnawn da pawb. I'm going to present on screen, so there are slides to complement, and also the presentation is to complement the report that you've received in advance. I very much aim this to complement the paper data as well, and impacts and things like that. So in terms of the agenda items, first one, I'm going to look at national attendance trends to paint the picture, to expand on the point that Julie's just made. What recommendations we've received, the improvements, the importance of good school attendance, some of them obvious, some of them not so obvious, roles and responsibilities. Moving on then, Rachel will pick up youth engagement and belonging, and then finally formal absence management. So in terms of the national attendance trends, you've probably heard this to death, if I'm honest, but this is data that Estin pulled together. It's not something I've pulled together. You can see there's a huge drop off. And interestingly, it's more secondary than primary. You'll also notice something with the scale at the bottom. Has anybody eagle-eyed picked up what's on the bottom? There are years missing. So the years that are missing came from Welsh Government said no targets. You know, the challenge was about, can we get people into school? not can we hit a target figure, that type of thing. So Estin recognised there's a real challenge there. Now, in terms of year groups, you can see the profile there. Tails massively into secondary school. If we look at free school meals, you can see a big difference again, secondary through to primary, and secondary is massively part of the challenge that we can see. Persistent absence, still quite sticky, it won't move, and also you'll notice that Welsh Government now have moved this as a figure to 10% as opposed to 20% absence. So Welsh Government have raised the bar. They've looked very much what England did. You know, England lifted their bar a few years ago. Welsh Government have followed suit, and really just to start bringing in that rigor and scrutiny, I guess, around it. But it really illustrates that challenge that's there. Now, in terms of whole school strategies that are needed, absence is interrelated. And the causes, it's no different to absence from work. People can be off from work. It could be as simple as, yes, they're ill. It could be they've got a whole host of social, family, different issues and pressures on them. So we need to understand what those factors are and have a system that allows us to unpick them. The second one, understand those diverse experiences that learners receive. You know, that's really important. Having integrated whole school strategies and also integrated working beyond school. You know, Julie mentioned again about multi-agency responses. It's really important we understand that. And then finally, multi-agency collaboration. Are we pulling together the resource of the council? You know, there's a huge amount of resource there. We've got to make sure we maximise the impact of that. So in terms of the legal and guidance frameworks, there's a learner engagement strategy document which outlines effective strategies. Some of them are really going back to basics, simply because, you know, target setting went during COVID and we have to get back to basics. So, you know, that's something we focused on. The All Wales Attendance Framework is a really comprehensive approach to managing learner attendance legally and effectively. We have a legal framework overview so that we understand the legal background and processes. We don't want to get there, but we have to accept there are going to be occasions where we have to do that as well. So quite a strong set of guidance and legal framework documents, and you know they've been received in the pack. So in terms of us now, Julie mentioned, you know, I've been here for 18 months. My welcome to the authority was day one. I remember Lowry spoke to me and said, welcome, and by the way, Eston have just phoned. Is that okay? So, okay, great. Eston came in, it was a really good, positive inspection. You know, again, you've seen that report. Recommendation one was about sharpening processes to improve attendance. So there was a focus on how we operate, how we integrate with schools, that type of thing. So the report was really to put an overview of that progress that's been made and also how we're working strategically. So what is the improvement in school attendance that we've seen so far? Well, we've done those things that we've mentioned already. We put a learner-centered approach in, and Conwy schools have been really, really collegiate in how they've worked with us. There are no closed doors. I think the head teacher groups on both primary and secondary have been incredibly positive, really opened up to us, really want to work with us to understand how they can move things forward. Big priority on mental health and well-being, so that's crucial. It's right in the middle of why would people want to come to school. They've got to feel their well-being's being enhanced and the mental health's in a good place. Talked already about integrated whole school approaches, so we've refreshed that. We've set up groups, which I'll talk about later. Head teachers have really had a focus put on there as well. And from a family and community engagement point of view, huge amount of multi-agency working. And again, Rachel will talk more about that later on. Now, to support all this, I'm a science teacher by trade, and I was a science researcher many years ago. So I'm one of those people, I need data to understand the problem and then work out what do we need to do. So starting point was, how can we actually get that so that we understand, rather than wait till get to June, see where the school is at and think, well, actually the horse has bolted. So we put a big commitment on to do that, and it is a we. I'd love to say it's me, but it's not a we. Everybody in education management team bought into that, the MIS team, Andy Nixon in particular. So what we've now got set up is every half term, every school gets a full attendance sweep, and I'll show you some examples of that now. It means that schools understand their data and can do something proactively through the year rather than wait. And also from a governing point of view, school governors can understand where the school is at in terms of attendance as well. We set up strategic focus groups. So every term we meet the attendance leads from the secondary schools, and it's very much a two-way conversation, very much so about keeping that focus on attendance improvement. And it's a chance for schools to talk to us to say, I don't know, we're finding there's a barrier in terms of X, Y, and Z, or we need some path clearing in terms of this type of approach. And also collaborative support networks to go along with that. We've really integrated well with those. So this is what the school attendance dashboard looks like. Apologies if you've seen this before, but it means every half term the school get a comparison of how do they compare to Conwy, how do they compare to Welsh national data, so they can frame where attendance is at in the school. And you'll see underneath as well, we have the key learner groups separated out so we can understand and frame, is there a target learner group within the school that the school needs more support with? And again, we can be proactive in trying to move that forward. We also split it down into a context of learners, so we can frame the challenge at the school. So if I run through the list, top number of learners is obvious. The boy-girl split can affect, where attendance is at in the school. If you get more boy-heavy cohorts, that can have an impact. FSM learners, so we can frame, does the school need a different type of support and challenge at times? How many ALN learners, so we can understand the challenge and support needed there. We put the number of white British learners in there, and obviously by default, number of non-white British learners, so we can understand any support needed in that perspective, and then from a year group perspective as well. And if I keep that moving, we also give a coding analysis, and I know this probably seems a little bit too much, but you can see from the categories, we can be really forensic in terms of, does the school need some support in terms of a part of the community? So, as an example, you see at the bottom there, traveller absence. We can be really clear on, does the school need some support there if it's required? Number of days lost to unauthorised absence. This has been another focal point. Listening to schools, they told us very clearly holidays were becoming a big problem. It almost became a COVID hangover where families felt we can go on holiday any time in the year. We've had to do some work around that with our schools to understand how can we pull that back in so that we can bring back attendance to where it needs to be. So again, we can understand where that data's at. Now, this is the actual comparison last year. So this was up to the February half term last year, up to the February half term this year. The reason why I couldn't do Easter, we're waiting for the data from Easter because obviously we've only just come back from the Easter holidays. So starting with primary school, you can see there's been some marginal gains there, but as we saw before, primary hasn't been as much of a focal point as secondary because, for the reasons I've said, but you can see there are improvements there. And if I keep moving, secondary, you can see there's improvements in all the year groups, which is really pleasing to see. Not the end of the journey by any shakes whatsoever, but it's proof that the strategy is starting to have that impact that we need in terms of the different year groups in a school. This is our sort of splits, if you like. Again, comparing February half term last year to February half term this year. Primary, you can see there's been that improvement, and also in terms of reductions in the absences, which is the purple parts of the pie. And if you go to secondary, again, you can see that improvement there. Still not where we want to be. We want to be better, no doubts about that, but it's proof that, like I say, it's starting to reap some rewards, the work that we're doing. Obvious link here is safeguarding. If a child's attending school, obviously safeguarding is something that you can perform in a school. If they're not attending school, it makes that challenge much greater. So we have a statutory duty on schools, and although it's not the purpose of this report, those of you involved in safeguarding at the county will know, we've just committed and completed some work with the Corporate Safeguarding Board to renew Conwy Schools policy for safeguarding, and that's being rolled out currently to hit in September. It will tie in with the attendance policy that we're renewing at the moment as well. The monitoring of attendance is crucial. Absenteeism can signal, as I said before, it could be illness, it could be a whole host of safeguarding issues. So having these data systems as they are means we've got a much better handle with those. Schools are committed really well to communicating with parents, and they do that. They communicate as much as they possibly can. And, I said again before about collaboration, we've put a lot of focus into how do the different teams, the authority, including safeguarding, liaise and function with the schools. So when attendance concerns are raised, what are the safeguarding areas that need to be unpicked there as well? So we've got an educational welfare officer team who function very clearly in that facility, might be home visits, could be supporting in school, so on and so forth. Another area that we are looking at the moment is something called the OTIS, which is Educate Otherwise and at School. This is where it's a slightly different area of education, if you like. It's where there's a reason why they can't attend their mainstream school. So it could be illness, it could be exclusion, it could be an otherwise reason, and there's lots of different reasons that will come in there. We have to provide education for that child, and it's got to be suitable education as well. So again, this is a branch of work that we're doing with schools at the moment, and also within the education team, to understand what we can do and try and move that agenda forward a bit more as well. But it certainly opens up from some vulnerable children, different pathways through education as well. Now, the importance of good school attendance, it's obvious in some ways, isn't it? But there's also some hidden bits. Now, I was a secondary school leader before this role. I was in charge of attendance at a big secondary school in Conwy, so I've seen it firsthand. Obviously impact on learner outcomes. If children are in school, they have a much better chance of achieving outcomes. And we all know, as an area, as a region, that's more beneficial for us. So regular school attendance obviously enhances those learner outcomes. It supports literacy, numeracy skills. We've got also the links in terms of careers, youth work kind of crossovers, everything in terms of making sure from a holistic point of view, we've got the really, really good citizens moving out of our secondary schools into the communities. Secondly, we've got social development. Good attendance means those children get social access, they build social development, they make friends, they build relationships, they build resilience, they learn to take the knocks with the good times, they understand how to work through tough times, all those sort of areas. Attendance is crucial for that. And then finally, well-being and confidence. If they're attending school, they're going to have that contribution towards their well-being, self-esteem, social skills, understand where their place is, how they can improve themselves, understand the networks that can help them to improve as well. Okay, so another area that we're working on, I mentioned before, was an attendance policy renewal within Conwy. We're very close now to bringing that to an end. So schools will have that new attendance policy, and primary and secondary heads have already indicated support for that to bring it in for September. And within that, we've tried to separate out roles and responsibilities for all the key stakeholders to make it really clear, who needs to do what. So in terms of parents' responsibility, obviously statutory-wise, parents need to bring their children to school. That's obvious. But also trying to build systems within schools so that is a positive message that's kind of translated over to parents. There is a home education avenue, not focused at this point today, but there is that option for parents as well as an avenue. In terms of schools and governing bodies, going back to the data system, when you read up best in documentation and also just good practice documentation, it's very, very clear in the middle that school governors should be able to challenge schools and understand where the attendance patterns are within the school. So that data dashboard that I mentioned before, school governors get access to that every half term, and it means as a governing body, it's really straightforward, and on a consistent basis, they can challenge the school, they can be the critical friend, understand, sometimes as well for governing bodies, understand where they can support. So making sure that's really, really clear for school governors has been important. From a school perspective as well, we've really, again, with that strategic focus group meetings, made it clear how should the school be operating, and some of it has been not going back to basics as such, but perhaps somebody 5 years later from COVID sitting down talking through, well, this is how we're doing this part of the challenge, how do you do it, building those networks from that point of view. And then finally, building the confidence of governors to challenge as well, making sure governors feel confident that they're not just thinking they know the attendance challenges in the school, they actually have them there and everybody can understand what they are. From the LA point of view, one of our key duties is identifying missing children. Massive, massive duty from a safeguarding point of view of understanding children who are in compulsory school age, who are not registered in a school. And I'll come back to this in a second. I've got more information on this. Monitoring education quality, that's, the education management team at the authority. It's one of the key things that we do. Obviously, we do that for the children in Conwy. And also the local authority should implement measures to monitor the attendance of pupils and challenge schools where appropriate. I know I've said it before, but I come back to that data dashboard system. That's very much the system. So schools understand from a consistent basis how they'll be challenged, and we can do that proactively. Now, the area of children missing education, complicated in some ways, but also, I don't want to use the word simple, but the challenge is simple in a way. This is all about separating out who's registered at a school as opposed to who is not registered at a school. So if I start first of all with somebody who's not registered at a school, that very much is a child missing education. So for us, we've got systems, and again, I'll run through those in a second, where we can triangulate, hopefully capture, that's very much the aim, any children who are not registered at school, so that we can organise that and make sure education is in place. The duty doesn't apply if a child is registered at a school. So if a child is registered at a school but is not attending the school, there are processes for that, but it's not classed as child missing education. That's where the educational welfare officers team would support. And again, like I say, there's very, very clear processes around that. Now, Welsh Government have got a good practice document where they make it really clear what are the things a local authority should be doing to make sure they don't miss children missing education. So you'll notice there's a tick by them in that we do these things, but I thought I'd read them through so everybody's really clear, what systems actually are in place for this. So the first one, providing a named point of contact to receive notification on children and young people. We have that within education. So first point, we have that there. Secondly, identifying vulnerable groups and individuals who are recognised as being greater risk. Again, we have our vulnerability systems there for that, and we integrate as a kind of integrated social care and education team. That's why we have that integration. Reduce the likelihood that children and young people fall out of education system through transition tracking and audits of the roll and registers of schools. Again, this is something we do. And also we have new systems which have come in, things like a fair access panel to make sure that people don't miss a transition. I'll have to explain this next one a bit more. Full usage and training related to S2S. Now, S2S is a computer system whereby if a pupil leaves a school, their information file, which is called a CTF file, so it's be boring, but I'll explain a bit more. That basically leaves the school and it goes into the S2S system and it sits there. And when the new school takes the ownership of the pupil, that file moves out. So in other words, you end up with a holding pattern. So if you don't check the holding pattern, you can have a pupil where this school thinks pupil has left and they're now at this school doesn't know, and the pupil is missing education. So we have a system set up so that we can pick that up. That's something Andy Nixon in the MIS team performs for us. Follow-up cases where children and young people are known to not be receiving a suitable education. That's something the ESW team would do and the education welfare officers, and we have legal powers to enforce that. Next one, ensuring ongoing monitoring and tracking of vulnerable groups, including those who have been excluded from school. Very much a key part of my role. If there are any permanent exclusions in the county, I will sit on the panels at the school, and also we have something called a fair access panel to make sure those pupils get access to education. It might be the PRU, it could be a mainstream school. Either way, we facilitate that move really quickly to make sure we don't miss those children. Children looked after and those registered as receiving education otherwise than at school. Again, we have capture systems for both sets of learners. Identify and locate children and young people who are not receiving a suitable education. We've covered the bulk of those already. Follow up admission applications that don't result in a school place and unsuccessful admission appeals. This is another part of our education management team where the admission officer, Kerry, will liaise with me. Any admissions where she's seeing barriers or blocks or ultimately a pupil not receiving education. Again, we work together on those. We have a fair access panel for that. And then finally, re-engaging children and young people with appropriate educational provision, multi-agency panels to broker admissions. I've mentioned the fair access panel that we have. That's something that we have for exactly that reason there. So that's the full list of Welsh Government good practice, and we comply with those as a county. Okay, at this point, I'm going to hand over to Rachel. I'm going to be Chris Whitty. I'm going to move the slides on. So
Thanks, Scott. So yeah, from a youth engagement and belonging perspective, our service is there to support our schools and to support in our communities. Through the statutory guidance that Welsh Government provide around youth work, all local authorities have a statutory obligation to have a delivery of effective youth service. We use the principle and purposes of youth work to focus on our educational development offer. It's a voluntary offer, so young people have to choose to be part of the youth engagement and belonging service offer. This is done through providing experiential learning through sports, crafts, leadership programs, and we also support through the youth work positive role model approach. Youth work plays a crucial role in bridging the gap between formal education and the real world, preparing young people for adulthood in the way that is engaging and flexible and relevant to their lives. So we use the 5 pillars of youth work, which is educative, expressive, empowering, inclusive, and participative. Youth work focuses all around the young person, offering support, guidance, and opportunity to tailor to their needs. Beyond individual impact, youth work also strengthens communities. It helps reduce social inequalities, tackles issues like mental health challenges and employment, and encourages young people to engage in life. The real power of youth work: it listens, it adapts, and ensures that young people don't feel seen, but they don't just feel seen, they feel truly valued. So where we have a role in supporting schools is around the Youth Engagement Progression Framework. The Youth Engagement Progression Framework is there to tackle the impact of poverty in education attainment. It's also there to help engage young people and raise their aspirations to ensure no one is left behind. It builds around the early identification tool that Scott mentioned earlier. We support our 11 to 16-year-olds who are at risk of becoming NEET, not in education, employment or training, or homelessness. We understand their needs, put appropriate support in place, and provide preventions and monitoring their progress. The framework is built on the 4 core components that I mentioned, 6 components that I mentioned there. That early identification, again, it's been a crucial part of our work to really get in there early through the identification of the data and the multi-agency meetings that we have with our schools. We're able to understand the needs of our young people quite quicker and get that support in place. The brokerage is very much around providing young people with the appropriate support. Monitoring progress, coming back to the data that Scott mentioned earlier around the monitoring, we need to understand that the positive impact of the you're clicking in and out. It feels like it. Can you hear? Sorry. Shall I hold it? Is that better? It's probably. So the monitor progress is to understand how the interventions that we're putting in place has a positive impact on a young person. The provisions are making sure that we have accessible provisions, not just done in the school, but also in the community. And then also within the framework is the employability opportunities. So we work very closely with our employability team. The key there is when we identify our young people who are leaving statutory education, we will link them with employability. Another element is the accountability. We share responsibility of the accountability amongst the partners, and that's formal education, youth housing, employability, and youth justice service. So within the youth engagement and belonging data, I'm just going to put it up, sorry, just make sure it's correct. So the aspirational figure for Wales is 9%, and of December last year, it was sitting at 11.6% of NEETs. Conway has an aspirational figure of 8%, and we are currently sitting at 6.3%, and we expect this status to lower again at the end of this month. So some of the interventions that we provide is the community focused schools offer. The element of this is to link with the family, the community, and a multi-agency approach. When schools engage with the families, they become more aware of the needs of the family and can offer support to access a broader range of services. This builds a stronger partnership with families, responds to the needs within the community, and collaborative, effective working across services. Over the last 3 years, we've worked hard to embed this approach, and this links with the whole school approach to mental health and wellbeing, which Scott mentioned. We also have our Track 11 to 16 support programme. This provides intervention for young people aged 11 to 16 who are at risk of being NEET or
meet when they leave school. The track wellbeing workers continue to work closely with the agencies such as school-based counselling, family centres, social services, school nurses and youth workers. By ensuring information where appropriate is shared, we are able to put bespoke plans together to suit young people. A large number of these students need support around thinking what they're going to do post year 11. We support these young people to write applications and look at opportunities. Many of these learners will have a plan A and B, sometimes they don't. And this is where we find our support is integral to ensure that they don't just become a destination in September on Careers Wales list. We are able to support these young people before they leave school to access alternative opportunities. These are also young people who are leaving school who return to us who may not have accessed support during their statutory school journey. As we know, adolescence is a period of great change and can be a challenge for young people to navigate. We work with Careers Wales, who provide data on pupil destinations, tracking where school leavers go after finishing their studies. This data hub is then accessed by the youth engagement team on a monthly basis, and they're called Tier 1s and 2s. Our Tier 1s are young people we do not know where they are, and they are our most vulnerable, and we need to find them. Our Tier 2s are young people who we know where they are, but they're not quite ready to go back into education, employment or training. Each worker is assigned a list, and once individuals are identified, they are allocated to an appropriate tier and allocated also to a lead worker accordingly for support. The youth service will provide lead work her support in most cases unless the young person has more intensive needs, and then we will support through accessing other services. We know that 16 to 25 years is often described as a pivotal and sometimes challenging stage of life. It's a time of significant change. Leaving school, entering higher education and workforce, moving out of home, building relationships, and figuring out identity and purpose. Many young adults feel pressure to have all it figured out, yet life is at that age is still uncertain. Therefore, throughout this process, we also promote and run a universal youth work offer, ensuring young people can readily access support up until they are age 25. I'll back over to you, Scott.
Thanks, Rachel. Okay, the last part now is looking at formal absence management. So I've almost tried to load percentages, if you like. The bulk of the presentation has been about positive relationship building, everything we try and do to engage learners. Unfortunately, there are cases very rarely where we get to the end of the road, then we need to do something a little bit more formal. So from that perspective, again, this is where our ESW service, our education welfare officers, that's where they would take a case forward. So schools can refer those cases to that team. If the child's attendance drops below 80%, there's a referral mechanism. The education welfare officers, they work within a cluster anyway, so it's not going to be a child they wouldn't know about. You know, that's the whole point of the cluster model that we have. They will try everything from multi-agency points of view to understand what can we pull together, what bespoke package of support can we pull from that resource that we talked about before across Conwy County. They will commit for an awful long length of time. You know, we're looking at a minimum really of 6 to 8 months of throwing literally the kitchen sink at everything possible. And it's only at that point, if we're still not seeing any kind of seeds or shoots of recovery, that legal intervention might start looking like, you know, being required there. Even that then is all about, does the family engage with support? So even at that point, if a family then engage with the support, legal intervention is not going to be followed up, because the whole point is we want to build bridges, we want to build the relationships. But unfortunately, very rarely, you know, that's there. And, you know, there's some figures underneath. It's a bit of a daft kind of graphic, but you can see there, it doesn't take a huge number of days missing to actually start hitting these numbers that we're talking about. So, you know, the Welsh Government target at the moment, 18 days absence in a school year would put you into a persistent absence category, which rightly, you know, Welsh Government have set the bar high, but it's 90% isn't quite the same, isn't it, mentally, as thinking of 18 days of absence. You know, you could hit that with a nasty bout of flu type of thing. Okay, so said before about if the families don't engage, we see legal intervention as a last resort. Courts can impose a parenting order, so that the whole point of that is to get the parents to engage with education offers. We've got education supervision orders, which again, it's about getting the engagement, but it's the opposite now. It's about the child is not engaging with the education. It could be the parents are. The parents are literally trying everything. This is the child themselves. So there's a different kind of route forward there. And those interventions I said before, they're long term, very, very long term. There was one case, I think it was last year, where sadly it got all the way through to a judge considering a custodial sentence. I mean, you can imagine the length and intervention, if you like, that went into that to get that to that point. A suspended custodial sentence was implemented at that point, but it shows you, there are these rare cases, but the legal teeth, if you like, are there. So to bring it to a conclusion, hopefully I've complemented the report by showing the strategy, the data to show improvements, the ethos, if you like, and the culture that we're trying to embed and have embedded, I think, within schools. So that importance of belonging, Rachel and I, the whole education team, that's one of our core ethos approaches, inclusion and effective inclusive strategies, and finally that inclusive environment in Conwy schools. Diolch.
Thank you both, Scott and Rachel. And before I open up the debate, I'd like to thank you for the report and for summarising so clearly the contents of the report and the framework. I think as councillors and also as governors, I think every single part of this report is relevant and important, and it's a shame that all councillors aren't able to be present tonight to hear this report. Regarding the slides, would those be available to share with our colleagues? Thank you. We're all concerned that a child of school age should be in school, but as you pointed out, there are several reasons and many reasons why they're not. And I think the last part of the framework is something that we didn't mention tonight, maybe is the safeguarding aspect as well, which is a huge concern for me personally, because these children are very vulnerable to all kinds of difficult situations. So thank you so much, and I'll open it up now to anybody who wish to maybe ask further questions or yes, whatever. Oes gen rywun gwestiwn fysa nhw'n hoffi
Does
i
anybody have a question they'd like to ask Scott or Rachel?
Yes, we'll start with, nawn ni ddechrau efo yr is-gadeirydd Kay man hyn.
We'll start with the Vice Chair Kay here. Thank you.
I think one of the big concerns that we have as councillors in our wards is children that are maybe on the elective home education system. And I think we've probably all got examples of children where the parents have been possibly fined, had the educational social worker, and the option for them is to take that child out of that system to prevent that from happening. So I think a lot of what you've gone through has given us some answers as to what happens in those situations. But I think maybe one of the questions I've got is, as a ward member, when I see some of these children that are, causing ASB in communities when they should be being home educated, and we know that that's not happening, what's the process that we need to follow so that you can do your job to make sure that these children are getting a standard of education that this report says that they should be? Thank you.
I think there's different parts to it. So from elective home education point of view, legally, the family receive a contact a year and also a visit once a year to look at the quality of education. Now, it's really challenging in that there isn't a set curriculum, there isn't a set assessment model. So you can imagine it's quite challenging to actually unpick what's educational as opposed to that's not. And I think if I put my old hat on in my old job, you hear different sides of the story from the family unit as well. I can think of one family unit where the parent said to me she was a great believer in literacy and numeracy, and an home education day was a couple of hours of reading, a couple of hours of numeracy, then there'd be some computer work and so on. The child later said that what actually happens is they got up at 3 p.m. and watched horror movies till 3 a.m. and then that was the day. So it's a big challenge and takes a lot of resource within the ESW team, if I'm honest, but we commit to those. We've got a very complicated data system to make sure nobody's missed from that system. We do the contacts around that. So we've got those challenges, if you like, in place. From a safeguarding perspective, if you've seen that sort of thing in the community, safeguarding is the route. So from the Conwy kind of website, to report a safeguarding concern, what that will do, because we work together, that would trigger that contact, and the ESW team lead interfaces with the safeguarding team. So if you've got that type of issue there, obviously go through that channel. The last channel I didn't really mention in this one, but it'll tie in a bit, is the work with Youth Justice as well. So I sit on the management board for Youth Justice. I mean, if it helps, I could add our education report that we've compiled, Rachel and myself, to show how we integrate. One of the things now, the education officer has access to our ALN system to make sure their interventions are bespoke. So it could be an elective home education learner, but making sure they understand how should they be pitching their interventions. And we also meet regularly where we look at the caseload. That's the point where, the education person from Youth Justice could be saying to me, a lot of antisocial behaviour, can we negotiate a visit from on the educational welfare team? So there's different avenues as well, but definitely the safeguarding route for sure.
Thank you, that's fine.
Nesa, nawr ni fynd at y cynghorydd Joe Nuttall, sy'n aelod.
Next we'll go to Councillor Joe Nuttall, who's a member.
Diolch. How much of this is down to pupil and parent mindset? Before COVID, if a child was, feeling slightly under the weather, parent would have said, go to school, you'll be fine. But now it's like, can you access the work online? Yeah, the teacher will put it online. So there's a bit of a maybe miscommunication there between the parent, the pupil and the teacher, thinking that they can now pick up this work online and it's not as important for this child to go to school. So does that come into it at all?
Definitely part of the challenge, and that's not it's not a Conwy challenge. That's Welsh National, I'd say British National, to be honest with you. There was a massive mindset change in COVID. I don't want to feel like I'm harping on the same thing, but when I worked at John Bright's in Conwy, and I was their pastoral lead through COVID, and you're absolutely right. And we're still fighting that. I is the we. Everybody from the authority and schools are fighting that challenge with some family units where their perception of education has changed into I can have this whenever I want. Can't you put something online for this evening? Or, would you be okay if? Whereas we've had to kind of get people back to that mindset. So you're absolutely right. Schools are doing everything in their power to promote that engagement, and also our teams also. It's just going to be a gradual shift, and the national data backs that up. It's definitely a challenge that it's not going to go away anytime soon, I don't think. The holiday part is interesting as well. That's another part of that. It's that mindset of, we could go on holiday whenever. Can't you give us some work online and we'll do it on the beach in Portugal? Not really.
Thanks, Scott. Can I come back on that as well?
Yeah.
Is there any data to show that children of the latter school years, the ones that did go to school through COVID, if they have siblings, that mindset is going to continue until that sibling finishes school, whereas those that don't have younger siblings, that new fresh children coming in will come in with a different mindset. So is this going to naturally grow out as these children leave school?
I think we can see evidence of that. When you look at the attendance figures, COVID, I think what COVID really showed was the pupils who didn't get an effective transition in COVID because the schools were closed, they literally moved through the system as a weaker attendance year group. And we're coming to the end of that now. I was driving here today thinking, my God, it's 5 years since that happened. And like I say, year 11 are our sort of last secondary year group who are moving through. So absolutely, I think that's going to be part of it. But a huge amount of resources has gone into those year groups rather than just washing hands and saying, well, we can't do anything with them. Huge amounts have gone in to try and re-engage those children with education before it's too late, And,
Thank you.
The proof of the pudding, I think, is the neat figure that Rachel mentioned before, which is it's pretty much half the target. So
thank you.
It's really positive.
Thank you, Scott. And I think we have to remember as well that parents have also gone through COVID, not just the children. And I think their priorities have changed, which is something that's really difficult now to put right, isn't it? Yeah. Next, Nessa, Cynghorydd Anthony
Next,
Batola.
Councillor Anthony Batola, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I like the framework. I'm looking at the progression of it and what's in action and other things. Is the fact that there are academics and sports enhancements in these schools, is there competition between the schools where they're doing activities? When I was a youth, John Bright would play Rydal, Rydal would play other schools, and there was competition in terms of sport and activity. Is that ongoing, or is that, not everybody's that academic? They want to be active and run around in sport and play other issues, and have competition in terms of sport. So I've often thought to myself, as a person's growing up, they find themselves not that academic, but they've got more issues in sport and activity. Is that part of, and have you got evidence of these people progressing as well, if I may ask?
In terms of the activities, absolutely, there's a huge commitment, not just secondary, primary and secondary, to extracurricular activities, the regional activities. If you want an example, from a football point of view, the Welsh Schoolboys competition and the Welsh Schoolgirls competition, they're always being entered by all the schools in Conway. It's a big prestigious thing. So there's an avenue there. From a music and performance point of view, very recently there was a show at Venue Cymru where, incredible, it could have been a professional show. I think people who've been there would say the same thing. Probably better than some of the professional shows I've seen, if I'm honest. So absolutely, there's a huge commitment there. And to be fair, it's done in the face of really tough budget situations. We've got huge numbers of people who commit to it. It's not about pay. It's about wanting to do the right thing for those children and give them those different avenues. In terms of data, I'm not sure what you'd want from the impact there. In terms of how many people are playing sport, you mean, or?
Yeah, I'm just
I
thinking.
think we're veering away from the report
Yeah.
now, aren't we? That's another issue
I think so,
altogether, isn't
yeah.
it? We'll keep that for another day, Anthony. Cynghorydd Simon Croft.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. You mentioned earlier in the presentation the data dashboards on attendance. As a governor, can we see those independently online somewhere?
We don't currently release them online. I mean, we can certainly consider it if that would be, I'm trying to think of a way we would be able to do that. There'll be a way, there'll be a solution. I mean, this is something that we started last year. Schools are meant to be giving those to the governing body via your attendance link within the governing body, but certainly that's something we could look at, couldn't we, Lowry?
Yeah, it's not something we discuss at every meeting because of length of time, really. It'd be useful to have access to it.
Yeah, and I think the purpose of us introducing that concept or reminding you of the concept again today is to encourage you to ask for that information. It's readily available. It's current at the point that it's sent through to schools, and it's there for governors to use to support the promotion and monitoring of attendance. So I would strongly encourage you, now that you know it is available, to ask for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr, Dr Lowry. Nid yn unig, da ni'n
Not
cael...
only we have the information today, but this is sort of a training session for us because we've learned so much from this report.
Scott, can you just remind councillors, when a child who's registered in a school is not in school, who is responsible for that child? Now, I know the answer, but can you just remind?
It's school. So if they're registered to a school, the school is responsible for the child. Probably we're touching on part-time reduced timetables here, aren't we? Where, they're not something beyond a very, very, very short-term initiative to try and re-engage. We're talking a week or two maximum. That they shouldn't be in place. So it's very much about challenging the school, reporting back to schools to ask the question, why is this child not with you at the moment? That's why I separated out the child missing education before. It's easy to become confused and think it's all part of the same pot when it really isn't. So absolutely, school have responsibility there.
Ie, diolch yn fawr. Thank you. Cynghorydd Anne McCaffrey.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Rachel and Scott, for a really interesting report, and one that really is practical. I love the data-based approach, Scott. Like you want to be able to interrogate data so that you actually understand what the problem is before you can look at solutions. So I'm on the same page as you as far as that's concerned. One area that perhaps I maybe just ask you to think about going forward is it may well be that when you're doing some of this that you might want to do consultation with the governors. I mean, governors are mentioned in all of the documents, but there's a governors association, which I'm sure you're well aware of, and I think potentially this sort of report being really practical, maybe at the time that you're launching the new policy, would be a really good topic for the governors association. Is just a point I wanted to make. And then the second thing is a question, and it's around mentioned throughout the report are authorised absences, and I wasn't quick enough to pick up your stats, to be honest, in terms of to what extent it's an issue across the piece. But one of the requests from me, and I don't know if you can sort of clarify it now, is there in terms of when a head teacher is making a decision whether to authorise a request for absence during term time, is interrogating the special circumstances, and the second one is looking at exceptional circumstances if it's more than 10 days. I mean, there is, I think, an emerging post-COVID default thought, I think for many people, that 10 days are allowed in terms of your holiday out of school, and of course we all know what the significant impact is both for teachers, learners and other learners. So is there going to be more guidance in the new policy around what special circumstances mean, and maybe what exceptional circumstances mean? Because I sense that there is a reluctance potentially to not grant a request just because it seemed to be default, really. Thanks, Scott.
There is, you'll be relieved to know it's something that primary and secondary heads very clearly said we really need that consistent list, if you like, of yes, that's exceptional, do you know something that isn't. So in the new policy, that's really clearly stated. So although we're coming to the end of the consultation phase with schools, I've got the final meeting, I think it's the 4th of June. Some of the primary clusters have already renewed their holiday forms. They've made it really clear this is the Conway line now in terms of exceptional, not exceptional. I was at a primary strategic heads meeting, I think that was it last week, Larry? I think it was, wasn't it? Where we actually looked at it as a cluster, and all the strategic primary heads agreed they were going to take that form forward to give that consistency there. So absolutely, that's in there and recognised.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Scott.
Diolch, Scott. Dwi am ddod ar cynghorydd.
I'm going to bring Councillor Paul Lecoq in now. He's not a member of this committee, but you're welcome to speak, Paul.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak. Yeah, thank you, Scott and Rachel, for your report and presentation. It was very helpful. And paragraph 1.2 in your report really highlights to us the existential dilemma we have even tonight in scrutinizing all of this information. It is very challenging. I spend quite a lot of time listening to children, especially children out of school, because you see them on the streets now and in the parks, and I always question them because I think it's interesting to know why they're not in school. And yeah, you come across some youngsters, to be honest, they're very amicable. I never get abused. And I have heard children say to me, just didn't fancy it today. But I also heard some of the other stories about, children who don't have a school, or they don't believe they have a school. There are children on some forms of part-time schooling. There are definitely children in supposedly home education situations, which doesn't seem very robust. And that's, to me, the dilemma in a sense. It's very comprehensive what we do, and there's obviously lots of people doing lots of good work, no doubt about that. But my feel is there are still children falling through gaps. Now, those gaps may occur because there are capacity issues, i.e., we haven't got sufficient numbers of staff, or we haven't got sufficient resources. I mean, I know locally in my area, the cluster there, we recently had a real dilemma about funding some of the attendance. You'll know about that in the Abergele area. I think we're resolving that now. But so there's a worry about capacity. And I know I'm not popular for raising it. I think sometimes there's also, in relation to what goes on, some capability issues. I genuinely believe that in relation to when things go wrong for particular youngsters. I'm not always sure that things have been as rigorous and robust as they should be. And I'm also self-critical of myself in that, because though both the schools that I'm a governor on, we have certainly that data report that you've shown here, that's definitely in the head teacher's report. And we definitely granularly go down into more detail in the head teacher's report and the safeguarding report. So I think we get a good experience. But you will have observed, Scott, I remember last year attending a pupil disciplinary meeting, and I tried to be as challenging and demanding as I could be on the school of why we were in that situation. But still, at the end of the day, I wasn't in a position to persuade people that things should have been done differently, because I think self-critically I let that child down as much as the school did. And one of the things I would like to see is on some of that detail that you've given us today, and that's my question really. At this county level, we could report on that granular information. Yes, we've got the information on the attendance, but I don't know how many children are educated at home. I don't know how many children are on part-time education. I don't know how many children on a particular day are missing having a school. And now, is it in Conway? Have we got a handful of children missing a school but not having a school to go to on a day, or have we got 50? I don't know. Likewise, educated at home. I don't know whether we've got a dozen children educated at home or 100 children educated at home. Now, I personally would find that detail reassuring and comprehensive, and would allow me to scrutinize it better than I can today. So if I'm being self-critical about myself and my role in all of this, I can't do my best without better data. And that's what I want as a councillor. I want better data so I can be appropriately and proportionately challenging to the system that we have.
Diolch yn fawr, Cynghorydd Paul. Oes 'na rywun eisiau
Does
ateb
anybody
cwestiwn?
want to answer the question?
I mean, in terms of if we separate them out, I'll start with a good news story from the piece then. So the learner that Councillor Paul referred to, unfortunately, was permanently excluded from the school. I actually visited the next school maybe 6 months afterwards, and they flourished there. So that's a good news story on, you know, if it gives you some reassurance that the system does capture people, you know. Certainly from the elective home education point of view, we have to data track that, you know, so we have a full accurate list. We have somebody committed to actually maintaining that. It fluctuates through the year, if you want my honest answer. So the challenging points very much come from transition. So you tend to see the spike in August, September. You know, you can imagine it's children, family units, the pressure builds through the summer holidays, and all of a sudden, I'm not sure, I don't think I can go back. So you tend to see those spikes there, but we monitor those. We also have to monitor people coming off those lists, because we know, okay, they've gone back to school. We've actually set up an engagement set of events as well, Councillor Paul. So if you want to come, obviously, it'd be really good if you came to one. We send an invite to the entire elective home education community. They come into Clopetla and it's an open agenda. So I gave you an example. I ran one, I'm trying to think now. I want to say summer last year, where the big feeling from the community was we don't understand exam entries. So we unpicked exam entries, we unpicked a location in Conway for the elective home education community to use. We've had queries. I mean, at one point, somebody asked me about science qualifications. Luckily, I was a science teacher, so I could answer it. It was just luck of the draw, if I'm honest. But so yeah, we have to data track those. We have to.
Diolch, Scott.
Could I just come back to one point?
Is
Sorry.
it something to do with the report?
Yes.
Go on then.
It's really something that Rachel was saying about the NEET situation, because these children who are out of school for these periods of time, what hits you immediately, these are the children nearly always that don't have much social and cultural capital. You know, they're bereft of that. And of course, then they're going to be bereft of that when they engage with the world of work. And I think, again, that for me is the challenge, in a sense, to the officers involved with these people, the work that's done to build up their social and cultural capital. And is that a focus of the work?
Yeah, that is a major focus of the work that we do. A lot of the work that we do when we engage young people, especially when they become socially isolated, is to get them back in them social settings, build their resilience, raise their aspirations, and that takes time. Every child's different, and we work at their pace, and you know, it's very much around their interests. We are seeing an increase in poor mental health now, young people, and you know, that has a major factor. We are seeing more vulnerabilities. We know that, you know, access to health, you know, by spoke services, there's waiting lists. So what we're supporting now is young people who are above that threshold. That said, we are seeing some really positive outcomes. We have been able to engage a lot of young people, you know, to re-engage back in education, employment and training. When we look at the youth engagement and progression post-16 data, when we find our tier ones and the tier twos, quite often they're not ready to go back into that setting. So it's about then working with them to gain that confidence to go back into whatever that setting is they choose. The team often say to me, it's about understanding the young person. It's about sitting there, it's about listening to them. They need to feel valued, they need to be heard. And we then adapt the offer to their needs and their interests. I think from a post-16 focus, when they are ready then to move into education or employment or training, we will support them to access our employability hub service. But it isn't a case of just handing them over, because these youth workers have built relationships with these young people and they're trusting relationships. So quite often we hear from young people, they feel let down, moved on. They want that trusted adult in their life for a period of time when they transition, whatever that transition might be. So that's where the youth work link is key. They still stay alongside that young person when they moved into employability or when they moved into college. So if it doesn't work out, they can come back and that support's there again.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Rachel. A diolch yn fawr iawn i chi am eich atebion
And thank you for your answers as well tonight and for your work. It's really, really amazing, I think. So the recommendation in this report is that the members note the content of the report and support the continued implementation of strategies to promote belonging, engagement and participation. So all I need now is someone to propose the recommendation and a seconder, please.
Cynghorydd Kay i
Councillor Kay proposing and Councillor Anne McCaffrey seconding. And could everyone show their hands, please, if you agree? Lovely, thank you very much. We will move on now to item 8B, consultation on the proposed amalgamation of Ysgol T. Gwyn Jones and Ysgol Iau Hen Golwyn, pages 375 to 399. And before we move on to this item, I think Councillor Gail Jones needs to declare an interest. Okay, Councillor Gail, can you declare the nature of your interest, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I declare an interest. I'm actually a governor at both schools.
Diolch, thank you. Cynghorydd Cheryl Carlisle.
Diolch. I am a governor at Ysgol T Gwyn Jones.
Yeah, thank you both. Right. Bydd yr aelod cabinet
The
addysg.
Cabinet Member for Education, Councillor Julie Fallon, will introduce the report, and John Davis, the Strategic Manager for Education, Property and Site Management, will present the report. Thank you, Councillor Julie.
So yeah, really straightforward. Obviously, we've been here a number of times before. This is just the opportunity for us to approve. Well, it will be your recommendation, obviously, to Cabinet, and then for them to decide in terms of approving to go out to consult on the proposed amalgamation of these two schools. So Ysgol T Gwyn Jones and Ysgol Hen Galwyn. Having visited the school, spoken to pupils, families, and staff. You know, they're wonderful schools, and I think this is a great opportunity to consult with the community to see if this is something that they want as we move forward. So John's going to go through the processes now, and obviously this is the start of a process. The decision won't be made here today. Like I said, Chair, it will go to Cabinet, and I'll present at Cabinet, and then the decision will be taken formally then. But this is your opportunity to feed into that process in terms of the consultation. So over to John. Diolch.
Diolch, Julie. Prynawn da pawb, good afternoon, everybody. The purpose of the report is to seek approval to start a consultation, as Julie mentioned, on the proposed amalgamation of Ysgol T Gwyn Jones and Ysgol Iau Hingolwyn. The proposal is to formally amalgamate Ysgol T Gwyn Jones Infants and Ysgol Iau Hingolwyn Juniors. The proposed new school would remain located on the sites of the two current schools, but would operate under one management structure. The proposal and subsequent statutory steps will be in line with Welsh Government Statutory Code of Practice, the School Organisation Code. The proposal would provide continuity of education for pupils, a greater sense of school community for all staff, pupils and parents, with one consistent vision and ethos, continuity and progression of learning through a seamless transition, shared teaching expertise and more effective deployment of resources. Initial discussions on the proposals have taken place with the head teachers and governing bodies of both schools. Both are content for us to move forward with a consultation. The initial report will be going to Cabinet, as Julie mentioned, on the 13th of May. If approved, then the consultation will start on the 2nd of June and run until the 14th of July. Consultation report with full feedback will then go back to Cabinet in and around the October time. A final decision would be expected in January or February 2026, with a new school start date to be agreed, if approved. This report is merely asking for approval to start with a consultation process. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, John.
Thank you, John. That's completely clear to all of us. Does anybody want to say anything before we move on to the recommendation? Councillor Stephen Price.
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me online? Thank you. I would like to propose that we go ahead with the consultation. I visited the school last year, and I've recently visited the school again today and spoken to some of the interested parties, and they are all of them are very excited about this proposal to amalgamate the schools. So I would gladly propose that we go ahead with the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you. They're one step ahead of us, then, aren't they? Okay, so I just dangos.
I'm just going to read again what the recommendation is, which is that the Education and Skills Overview and Scrutiny Committee scrutinises the report and make appropriate recommendations to Cabinet, and subject to our consideration, that Cabinet approve the Council undertakes a consultation which proposes to formally amalgamate Ysgol T Gwyn Jones and Ysgol Iau Hen Galwyn as one school. So Councillor Stephen Price has proposed. Do we have a seconder?
Frank Bradfield yn eilio.
Councillor Frank Bradfield seconding, and can everybody show in the usual way, please? That's it. Can I thank you all for your attendance this evening, and thanks to the officers for their work and their contributions, and a good evening to all of you, and to the officers as usual here who are with me from the Democratic Services. Thank you very much.
Diolch yn fawr iawn.